Hello. This tutorial will cover how to make the stamp model in Fusion 360 and how to prepare it for 3D printing. The original idea for the stamp project came from an Instructables workshop made by Jonatron. This was published back in 2016. I just want to give credit to the original creator. But Fusion has since updated their user interface in the last couple years. So a lot of the items and kind of workflow of what he clicks on and kind of demonstrates, the principles are still valid, but it's not very helpful as a beginner tutorial. So we're going to take Jonatron's ideas and we're just going to update it for the current version of Fusion. So we'll go ahead and minimize that. So you're going to make sure that you are in the correct folder over here in your data panel on the left-hand side. Whatever class project and whatever year and trimester, and make sure you're in your personal folder. And this is where I'm going to save it. First thing we want to do is make sure we save our project. I'm just going to call this stamp DMC. I'm going to put my initials in there. If everybody in class names it stamp project, then we've got a dozen projects named the exact same thing. So make sure you put your initial, your name, and what you're planning on working on. Once I've got this saved, and it kind of creates the file over there, and I know it's in the correct place, I'm going to go ahead and close my data panel. And that gives me a little bit more room over here to work with. So we're going to go ahead. This is going to be all just one part, so we'll just go ahead and start by creating a sketch. I'm going to select this top work plane right here. And we're going to have our stamp, the head of the stamp, be an 1.5 inch circle. So I'm going to grab the center circle. I'm going to come in here and type in 1.5 for my diameter. And that's going to be the diameter of the head of the stamp. Okay. The body will be coming down. So if this is an 1.5 inches, sorry, let me go back this way. I'm going to draw another circle. I'm just going to hit the C, letter C on my keyboard. And we'll make this 0.75. This will be the size of the handle. And we'll go ahead and hit enter and place that. As always, want to make sure that your sketch is black. That means that everything is defined and fully constrained, locked into place. I'm going to come up here. And a couple ways to do this. You can just make another circle that's a little bit smaller than 1.5. Or you can come over here to the offset command. So we'll use a new command. We'll hit the offset button. It asks me to select the sketch curve. And with a circle, it's really easy. And you can either drag this inside or outside. With a circle, it's just as easy to do the circle command a second time, but it's helpful to know the offset command. If you've got a different geometry and you just kind of want to expand it or shrink a little bit, you can do that. So we're going to shrink this in, and we're just going to do a 1/16 of an inch, which is negative 0.0625. So that's going to be our border of our stamp. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish this sketch. We'll kind of go back to the perspective view. We're going to want to save this again. We'll call this sketch 1. And just want to get some real basic geometry out of this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this outside circle and this middle one. I'm going to leave this blank for just a second. I'm going to go downwards away from my sketch. I'm going to want to bring everything else up in the positive direction. And I'll just leave this as negative 0.1. We'll click this. This is our new body. And we're going to say OK. As soon as you extrude something, Fusion hides the sketch. So we can kind of come back in here and turn that sketch back on. Once again, we need to make sure we get our 6 saves at minimum. So I'll say that is extrude 1. And the reason that I extruded this downward is so that I can have all of this sketch material still on the top part of my object. If I extrude it up, then the sketch would be on the bottom of my object. It would be harder to work with. So I'm going to do another extrude. I'm going to grab this center circle, and we're going to screw this down. This will be the shaft of our stamp, and we'll say negative 2.5. That's a good length for a handlebar stamp. We want to make sure that we've got the join command over here so that this is one body. That's going to make it easier for us to 3D print. I'm going to say OK. And then now I'm going to come over here. We'll save that as extrude 2. All right. So I've got that handle as my second extrude. And then we're going to do one more. We're going to grab this ring right here. And we're going to extrude that upward just 1/4 of an inch, 0.25 inches. Okay. And actually that looks a little bit tall. Let's go back. I'm going to change that to 1/8 of an inch. So to change that extrusion, since I kind of changed my mind, I'm going to come back down here to my timeline along the bottom. I'm going to click that extrude to select it, and then I'm going to right click with my mouse. I can come up here and say Edit Feature. And it just brings me back to this dialog box when I started the extrude. Instead of 0.25, we'll just cut that in half. We'll say 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And in my mind, that looks a little bit better. We'll go ahead, turn off the sketch just for a second to kind of look at it. We'll save that as extrude 3. Okay, and this is kind of the skeleton of your stamp. What you can do with it from here is kind of up to you. I'm going to show you some helpful things. If I come over here and look at this from the right side, a couple things about 3D printing. If I were to 3D print this as it is, and this part of my stamp was on the bottom of the printer, then this overhang would present a problem. I would need some kind of support to keep the filament from just dropping into nowhere as the 3D printer tries to make this. So what you can do, I'm going to ask for you to change the handle of your stamp, add more to it than just this cylinder. So the way that we're going to do that, the easiest, and I'm not going to allow you to do just this, you have to do a little bit more than this. I could come in here with the fillet command. I could grab that line and I could kind of extrude this outwards so that it's no longer just a right angle. The printer would be able to get most of this, and only at this last section out here that it would need supports. Okay, so we'll see if we can't keep adjusting that. I'm actually going to come down here and get rid of that fillet. And I'm going to do this instead. Come back to my perspective view. I'm going to create a new sketch. And I want to do it on this front plane, which is kind of right down the center of my stamp. I'm going to create a stamp here, or create a sketch plane there. I'm going to come over here to the project and include. And I want to know, I'm going to click on intersect. I'm going to click on bodies. And I know where that body cuts through that center plane. And you can kind of see the geometry as I hover over it. In red, you can see where that, if we kind of cut through with a knife, what the cross section would be. And I want those lines in my sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. It kind of turns blue and purple, which is harder to see. I'm going to hit OK. But now all of those lines are part of my sketch. So now this is where you can do whatever you want to. I'm going to come over here to the spline, because this will draw some nice easy curves. I'm going to grab this corner, and I don't want to come in too sharp, because that overhangs are what Fusion has a problem with, or what the 3D printer has a problem with. But I want to kind of give my stamp some nice curves. And I'm just kind of, well, you know what? That's a little bit too steep. 3D printer will have problems with that as well. So let me hit undo that point of the spline. We'll kind of come back down here, make sure I snap to that point right there. And then we'll hit the check mark. And once again, I've got this blue area, which means that it is a enclosed profile. It is not fully defined because there's no equations or measurements that defines where that curve is, but I just wanted it nice and curvy, so I'm okay with that. So now I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. Kind of come back to our perspective view. We'll save this. Man, I can't remember what sketch I'm on, so let me come back here. Let me cancel that. I can't remember where I am in my story. I've already done sketch 1, so as I save this, okay, I'll save this. This will be sketch 2. Okay, and then all I'm going to do, and this is the great thing, is I'm going to take this profile and I'm going to just kind of wrap it around the whole cylinder. So instead of extrude, which just does it in a straight line, we come over here and grab the Revolve command. It asks for the profile, so I'm going to grab that profile right there, which is kind of the whole thing. And then it's going to ask for the axis. If I pick that purple line right there, it's not going to work well. Let me see if it'll let me grab that purple line. That's on the outside of my object. If I try to grab that purple line, it's not, oh, I had to click axis. That's why it's being difficult. If I grab that purple line, it's just going to turn it around kind of right there on the side of my object. And I can either choose to join it, or my thing's got a lump on the side, or I can choose to cut it, and then it kind of takes a chunk out of my thing. But that's not the axis I want. I want the axis right here at the center of my object. And now it's going to wrap it. We can kind of take this. I want to do a join. And as I rotate this around, you can see, hopefully you can kind of see, that it's creating that extra geometry all the way around my stamp. And we'll just say 360. It's not always easy to get it with the handle, so I just say 360 for the full way around. I'm going to say join. I'm going to say OK. So now my kind of boring stamp that was just a cylinder has now got those fun curves. None of these are too sharp, so I think the 3D printer should be able to handle that. You don't want big overhangs. The other thing that's important, the bottom of your stamp must be flat so that this can stick to the printer bed when we're 3D printing. Last thing we're going to do, so we did that revolve, so let me save that. We did a revolve. We're going to come in here and we're going to do a chamfer. We're going to grab this edge. If possible, we'll kind of make that a nice 0.06, kind of gets us right to the edge there. Let's go ahead and we can do it. We'll do 2 distances. So you can control this distance with the first arrow, and then we'll take this arrow down right there at the edge as well. So we got that chamfer that kind of makes a nice cutting surface. When we 3D print these and then put them into wax, you do not want to have vertical surfaces. That's hard for the stamp to get out of the wax. You want to have everything slightly angled. Okay, and then the design that you put on here, I'll put in chamfer. The design you put in here is up to you. The easiest thing to do is just your initials, like we did for the 3D printer test, but you can put in a design or something else. I am going to create a sketch on this surface, not on the bottom plane, but on this surface right here. I'm going to insert an SVG into there. And I'm going to do it from my computer. I'll put this on my desktop so I'll be able to find it. I'm going to put in the Steelers logo because I love me some Steelers. And it came upside down, so I'm just going to kind of spin it around 180. I'm going to use this button to kind of shrink it down so it fits. I'm going to use this to kind of slide it right in there. Okay. I'm going to say okay. Now, as much as I love me some Steelers, the problem with this is real easy to say finish sketch. I'm not going to save this in my design history, but I can extrude this. I can extrude all my fun little Steeler parts. Okay. And this is an absolutely fantastic, awesome looking CAD model. I'm going to say join. And we're going to extrude this upwards. We did the other one an 1/8 of an inch. So we'll do this an 1/8, 0.125. You want the height of this extrude to match the height of that. So now I've got that. I'll go ahead and turn off the sketch. I've got this amazingly awesome Steelers logo right inside my stamp. One of the things that we want to do is we want to put a chamfer on all this. But the problem is these things are so tiny that as I try to come in here and grab the S and put a chamfer on this letter S, we'll just go ahead and do equal distance. As I start going in, it immediately starts having problems trying to put a chamfer on something that small. And that's going to be the trouble you're going to face. That if your object is too small, 0.01. Nope, still not happy. No, 0.005. There you go. So this is 10th hundredths. That's a 5/1000th of an inch chamfer. And while that looks nice on Fusion, the problem is that's never going to make it into the 3D printer. So let me go over the process. This, as wonderful as this is never going to print. And let me show you why. We'll go into our Tools menu, click Make, and then 3D Print. I'm going to uncheck the box for 3D Print Utility. I'm going to grab my body. I should save it. It's all just one body. So I'm going to hit OK. We'll save this to the desktop as well. Don't just call it stamp. Make sure it's named something. We'll call this one Steeler stamp. I'm going to save this as a .stl file. And everything is fantastic. But when I come into Prusa Slicer, come up here to import STL, I'm going to bring in my Steeler stamp that I just got done making. Fusion's going to see that it was in inches. It's going to convert it to millimeters. So we'll go ahead and say yes. And there's my stamp. And even in Prusa Slicer, it looks fantastic. It's got the Steelers logo, and it's kind of hard, but if I zoom in really close, you can see even in Prusa Slicer, it's got that chamfer. Well, that's all nice and good, but when I come over here and actually try to do my print settings, I've got the Mark III's, which is what we have. We're going to use PLA filament for the print settings. We're going to use the 0.3 draft. We'll leave the infill everything. The reason why I want the bottom of the stamp flat is so that this bottom surface is connected to the print bed. If you try to print your stamp the other way, let me go ahead and rotate this 180 degrees. The stamps do not print well this way because there's this gap underneath here. If you try to do supports under that gap, it's going to mess it up. And there's just not a lot. This is kind of a knife edge. A lot of these things are not very big. There's just not a lot of material that is sticking to the bottom of the 3D print bed when you do it this way. So that is why I require you, we'll just rotate this 180 degrees again. I require you to have a flat bottom to your stamp, and that you print it with the design facing upwards. But once I go ahead and slice this, you'll see the problem that happens. Not just is that chamfer too small, but the entire set of Steeler's words are too small. The nozzle, this orange line and this yellow and this red line, that's the actual thickness of the plastic that it's laying down. That's as small as it can get. And all of that writing in the Steeler's logo is just way too small for the 3D printer to actually put down on the paper. So it just kind of skips it. So all of that detail is just too small for the 3D printer. So I just get these 3 diamonds, which looks kind of cool. And I kind of know what it is, but it doesn't have the whole logo. So you just need to be cautious of when you are in Fusion, of just knowing that just because you can design it in CAD, and just because it looks good in CAD, and I kind of got that little chamfer on there, and my Fusion model looks good, just know that this is way too much detail for the 3D printers to handle. So I'm just going to come down here to my timeline, delete the chamfer, I'm going to delete that extrusion. I'm going to come into that third sketch. I'm going to right click, edit that sketch, and I'm going to grab that whole sketch and just delete that whole thing. It's much easier to do a simple design. You can come in here with the text and same thing again. Draw a box and then just type in DC. I can kind of put that where I want it. Let me go, I think Arial Black is a little bit fatter. I'm also going to do bold. And then I'll just kind of move this around. I'll say, okay, should be able to drag that to the center. There we go. I'll finish that sketch, and then this is what I'm going to extrude. I'll get back to my solid workspace. Extrude this sketch. I'll extrude those letters. Profile select. We'll come up that 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And these are much easier to put a chamfer on. Come in here. Since it did this, see all those little segments, I'm going to have to grab every single one of those little segments to put a chamfer on, so that's kind of tedious. Oops, and I missed. So I'm going to have to delete that and try again. But you get the idea. You can put a chamfer on those. I'm heading out of cancel. And then this is going to be much easier to print on the 3D printer. Okay. So your design in the center is up to you. Just know that if you try to put too much detail into it, if you get objects that are too small, the 3D printer simply will not be able to handle it. So when you are doing your design for your stamp, make sure it's the same height as this outer edge. We used an 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. Make sure you extrude this the same. And then when you put a chamfer on it, make sure that you kind of make this edge not vertical. That'll make it easier to come out of the wax when we do the 3D printing. Thank you so much. If you have questions, just send me an email. Thank you.